Recorded live. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Genesis Science Fiction Radio Show, a service of the BlackScienceFictionSociety.com website. This is the November 29th, 2013 edition, the last edition in November before we start hitting that, for us here in Chicago, the colder weather of December. And tonight's special guest is John Jennings, and he's got such a plethora, I love using that word, of accomplishments and things that he's involved in. Normally, we would probably push out this show to be maybe 4 or 5 hours just to try to encompass everything that he does, but unfortunately, it's going to be a 2-hour show. But John, welcome to the show, and thanks for coming.
Hi, William. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it, and those out there listening in digital radio land, thanks for having me as well. So yeah. Hey.
and you're coming to us from my hometown. I mean, actually, we should have just had you come over to my house.
I know, but yeah.
You're visiting, but you're visiting though, right? Where do you call home these days?
These days, I'm in upstate New York. I live in Buffalo, New York, and I'm a recent transplant from actually the Midwest. I used to teach at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, so yeah, and so I'm a recent transplant. So I teach in the Visual Studies program at the University of Buffalo, State University of New York, which is about an hour 20 minutes from Toronto. So I'm like way up there. So
yeah, I like both. I like Toronto, but Buffalo, isn't Buffalo pretty chilly during the winter?
I mean, most places are chilly during the winter.
Well, I mean, a little more, and you know what I'm talking about. I mean, more than even Chicago, because Chicago can be pretty bad.
It can be pretty. Well, here's the thing: is a lot of people don't realize that we get more snow in Buffalo, but it actually is colder in the Midwest because you have to have like a little bit of humidity, for it to snow as much as it does. So yeah, it's like some of the winters are longer, and honestly, it's like I really have found like the winters in the Midwest are about pretty much colder. But that's just me so far. So I don't know.
Oh no, it's not just you. I mean, I'm sick of winter already, and here it is. We're not even out in November. I mean, I was telling somebody today that I've had it, man. I've had it. So okay, so you taught down in Urbana. I visited down there a couple times because friends of mine from high school ended up going going to college there. I actually almost got arrested down there, which I think is it was good that I avoided it.
Yeah,
how long? Yeah. So where did you grow up though?
Yeah, I'm originally from central Mississippi. I was born in Brookhaven, Mississippi, which is about an hour and a half from north of New Orleans, and then I grew up in a small town called Flora, Mississippi, which is about 30 minutes north of Jackson, Mississippi, which is the capital. So, and I grew up in a very agrarian space. I literally grew up in the middle of the sticks. So it's like, and so I'm a long way from that space. But yeah, so yeah, that's where I went. It's mostly was a very small town. I think they have a stoplight now. But back in the day, it was a very quiet upbringing. I think. Back in the woods.
Yeah,
so, that's where I originally hail from.
And would it be fair to say that you're predominantly an artist and an educator?
Yeah, I think that is actually a pretty fair assessment. I mean, I like my undergraduate degree, which I went to Jackson State University, which is probably like the most dominant HBCU in the state of Mississippi. It's in Jackson, and it's and I went there from 89 to 93, and I have a undergraduate degree in commercial art, which is like the great granddaddy of graphic design, and a minor in drawing. So, so I'm trained as a studio artist, and then what ends up happening is I actually went to the University of Illinois as well for graduate school. So I actually had a master's in art education, so that's where a lot of my interest in the educational aspects come from. And then in '97, I finished with the Master's of Fine Arts, which is a terminal degree in studio art, and it's in design, graphic design. So, and then what was really crazy is that I actually went back to Jackson State. After that, I worked in the field. I worked at a computer software company as a packaging designer for about a year or so. I ended up getting recruited to go back to Jackson State to help revitalize the graphic design program there. And taught there for like 4 years, and then I ended up getting recruited back to the University of Illinois, for a very similar reason. Yeah, and I was there for like 8 years. Actually, was as far as I could tell, the first African American to get tenure in art at the University of Illinois, and that's 2008. So.
Yeah, it seems kind of late. But I mean, okay, so that's your schooling, but I'm guessing that you, I don't want to say discovered your artistic bent, but I mean, when did you start realizing that being an artist was, you're kind of like your track in life?
Yeah, probably pretty early. I think as far as I could tell, I was drawing before I could write properly. I'm going to say like maybe 4 and a half, something like that. And I was exposed to a lot of crafts, arts and crafts early on. Again, I was raised by my grandparents and my mother, and my mom and my grandmother were both quilt makers and dressmakers, and so they were always doing like crafts that were using like found material, and so they were always making like pieces of colorful materials hanging around the house and being like used for different things. So, and then the other thing was my Uncle Willie, Willie Albert. He was an artist as well, and he would pretty much draw stuff for me, so he was really into comics and things as well, or he could draw pretty much everything he could see, and so he would draw me things, and I was actually like really into comics pretty early on. My mother bought me the Thor, like the Mighty Thor comic book, and
sure.
And I was always an avid reader. Like I was a young reader, and I would read a lot. And so, not a lot to do, in the woods like that. It's like it's pre-cable, pre-everything, right? So anyway, my mom would, buy me comics and stuff, and so I was like just hooked on that, And so what happened is my uncle just kind of got tired of drawing stuff for me. He's like, draw it yourself, And I was already kind of drawing anyway, but like he was he's probably tired, and he was like, and I just took it and I just kept drawing. I was like, okay, I will. Dang it, you know what I'm saying? So it's like, so that's kind of like how it kind of ended up becoming like my passion. I drew like mostly through high school and stuff like that. And I always wanted to be an artist, and I went to a severely underfunded school, as far as like counseling and things like that. So besides the people that my family, I had never really met a professional artist before,
Right.
And so, so I didn't really see that around me. So what ended up happening, I graduated when I was 17, and I was really good at school. I always loved school, but I really didn't have like a direction as far as like what I wanted to do. And so I ended up in the military. Actually, I went to the United States Army, and so I was in for like, I don't know, about 6 months, and I was in an accident and, hurt myself. And so I ended up having a scholarship because, I had taken the ACT and scored pretty high on it, but, by that time I'd already like signed my name on the dotted line, so to speak. And so I was med-boarded out honorably, and I had a scholarship to Jackson State University, and I was like, wow, yeah, I think I'm going to do this art thing now. So that's kind of like how I ended up, being an artist. And I just realized that, it was something that I was literally on the wrong track, I don't know, it's probably like one of the best breaks of a third metatarsal ever in the history, well, at least my history for sure, right? So,
well, I mean, it sounds very fortuitous. I mean, obviously you were on track to do other things, and then, not everybody has kind of like a lucky accident, and I mean, excuse me for saying, I don't mean to offend or anything, but to have a lucky accident that brings you to what it is, what the hell you want to do,
Yeah, it's the epitome of serendipity, I think,
Yes, yeah. I love that word.
That's one of my favorites. It's like plethora. You know what I'm saying? Anyway.
Well, I'm a wordsmith. Every now and then I run into a cool word, and
Yeah.
You know, I like to hang on to it. All right, so okay, and then so you get the scholarship, you get into school, you start doing your thing.
Right.
How soon, you know, did you start doing? I mean, did you commercialize your talent? Did you, you know?
Oh man, that's a really, no one's ever asked me that before. That's a great question. I would say like almost immediately, honestly, like when I don't know, it's one thing about what coming up, you know, in the middle of nowhere, kind of like, let's just say I had not as much access to capital as some people would, you know what I'm saying? And so I was always looking for a way to, to make some money and to actually like kind of better my situation. So on campus, I started this little company called Up All Night Graphics, you know, and
Okay.
so basically I specialized in doing like flyers for for sororities and fraternities for their parties, and I would end up doing like, you know, campaign posters. You know, I would paint on like people. This is when painting on people's jackets was still in vogue. It might be back in vogue these days, and how things go with style. But yeah, and so I would do this kind of work, and ended up becoming kind of like a little cottage industry. You know, on campus, when I was on campus, I could actually actually pull in some money. And so I want to say I must have been around 20 when I started really thinking about being an entrepreneur and doing this stuff. So yes, about 20 years old, you know.
Well, yeah, and two things about that strike me. The first is that, I mean, obviously other people recognized your talent and recognized what you brought to the table and would seek you out. And the second thing that I noticed was you started working for the sororities first and then the fraternities, which I think, you know. So
yeah, what if it was? I don't, you know. I think I said sororities. Yeah, that's pretty funny. But yeah, but I ended up doing like everybody's flyers and stuff, and then actually by my junior year, I was actually trying to find a partner. You know, so I was actually interviewing partners. You know, and it was funny because I would find people who were like fast but not really good enough, and then I would find like people who were really good but not fast enough. And I was like, you know, because the whole piece is like they would call me. Like, say for instance, like Alpha Phi Alpha would give me a ring. Like, it's funny because one of my best friends is Ronaldo Anderson, and he, you know, was I used to tell him, I think one of the was Dean of Pledges at the time, right? And you know, they would call me like all the time to do like the flyers and stuff. So he called me like 2:00 in the morning. I would jump out of bed, you know, draw up a flyer, and they'd come by and pick it up in the morning. Before you know it, you know, the whole place was like canvassed. It was canvassed with you know, with flyers and stuff, you know.
Right.
Yeah. But anyway, it's funny because, you know, Ronaldo and I recently, like, we connected and have been working on a lot of projects together dealing with, like, Afrofuturism and Black sci-fi. And, you know, it's kind of like, you know, ironic that's kind of like how we met, you know, so many years ago, you know.
Sure. And you were interested in that brand of art fairly early on?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, I mean, I think there's something that appealed to me about the graphic nature of things. I was always fascinated by symbols and signs, and my mom had a lot of books. You know, she was a literature major at Alcorn State University, and so she had a lot of her college books still laying around. In fact, I want to say that the stuff that I started reading initially were just her books, you know, and so
right.
But she had like a bunch of books on like psychology and like astrology and stuff like that. And I was always really interested in like really arcane symbols and things, which, you know, to a certain degree are logos, right? I mean, that's what a logo is, a symbol. So, you know, I was always kind of fascinated by that type of mark making and these really graphic images. And, you know, my mom was a really big like action movie fanatic. And so I was like, surrounded by these, I was, you know, imagine like, you know, go up in the middle of the woods, you know, watching all these crazy like B movies or going to like grind houses, and then your grandmother is actually telling you ghost stories and stories about haints and hexes and things of that nature, and these kind of like, you know, belief structures that are probably connected to like hoodoo or the Gullah people's, you know, spiritual beliefs and things like. It's a mixture of a lot of different like supernatural and speculative spaces that I get, you know, that I really, you know, got attracted to. And so and I was always really into mythology and science and history, things of that nature. And so all that stuff just kind of, built on top of itself to make the person that, that you're interviewing. So it's
sure.
Yeah, kind of wild. So.
Now, you mentioned that you were, while you were in school, you were looking for a partner. And what kind of partnership were you going to start? I mean, were you guys going to be artists for hired guns, or did you have a project like a comic book thing, or I mean, where were you going with this desire to create a venture with a partner?
Well, the thing is, like at the time, I just needed help. I needed someone to help with the sheer volume of, because what happened is by the time I was a junior, everybody was coming to me for like work, So, and I wanted to be able to deal with it because I'm talking like anything that needed to be drawn, or designed, or turned. Actually, at one particular point, I was doing people's campaign posters, and even for extra charge, for like $80. I would do a campaign speech for you and do your boards and that kind of stuff. It was kind of
so I mean you had leanings of being a writer back then, plus you already had an artistic bent.
Oh yeah. It was kind of cool. Yeah, so I was it was funny. It was like I was kind of becoming like an advertising dude, or like someone who's in marketing, or and not even really knowing. And actually, at the time, I was working for the school newspaper. I was like doing comics. I had like a little kind of like an op-ed joint. It was called Academia. Where I would kind of like complain about stuff, that was happening on campus. But what was really interesting about that is, the Clarion Ledger came by, and I was involved with the Blue and White Flash, which is the newspaper on at Jackson State's campus, and I happened to get an interview with some of the artists from the Clarion Ledger, which is the largest newspaper. It's in the state, and it's a Gannett paper, so it's owned by the same people who own like USA Today, And I ended up getting an internship, which was amazing. And actually, before I ended up going to grad school, it was great. They actually trusted me to do like a lot of graphics and stuff. But what was really cool is that they hadn't had a graphic intern in a long time, and so they took advantage of the space. It was a couple of interns up for grabs, and after meeting me, looking at my work, and talking to me about the work, they wanted to bring me on, and and that was really cool. And so what ended up happening is, even in grad school, I was still getting calls from Gannett papers all over the country to come and work for them, which I thought was amazing, because what happens is when you do the interns and you start working, they put you into a system, So I actually had like, the Detroit News hit me up, and so did a newspaper in California, And I was like, oh man, I'm in grad school, I can't do it, but thank you so much. But it was, I don't know, it felt good to learn under those gentlemen that I was working with. So.
And it sounds like that they were good at mentoring you and helping you kind of focus and develop your own talent. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. It was an excellent place to cut your teeth coming out of, undergrad. And at the time, Jackson State didn't have, digital means of creating art, and we had like a few old computers, like the Amigas and things like that, but nothing that was up to par what was going on in some of the larger universities. But what we did get at Jackson State was a very good classical trained background. So I
grounding in the fundamentals.
Really, really, really fundamental. Yeah, exactly. And so I had that's a phone. I'm sorry about that. Can you hear that? My bad.
No, it's okay.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this. I mean, you did a lot of time at Jackson State, and then you came up, a little further north. You're in Champaign-Urbana. Now you're in Buffalo. Somebody's kind of questioning, are you glad that you left the South? How do you feel about? I mean, I would imagine doing the work that you do, with the exception of classroom work, you could do commercially your work practically any place.
Yeah, that's true.
Because
Yeah.
So how do you feel about? I mean, is there anything location specific about, where you want to live, where you want to work, that you have a preference for?
You're like asking all the most awesome questions. Honestly, like, here's the thing: is I actually left Jackson State, graduated from that, but I came back and I worked there, very hard to build a program. And I think what was going on is not necessarily the location as much as the institution at the time. I was teaching a lot of classes. I mean, Jackson State, I don't know if you know the history of it, but it was, it's formed around it's a teaching school, so it's very service heavy. It was founded in 1877 to educate freed slaves, and it has that kind of you're in the classroom a lot, and so basically what was happening is my own work was suffering, as far as the things that I wanted to make and the things that I wanted to do with my own career. And so when the opportunity came that I could actually get to a Research One institution, with a Research One university, research comes first, pretty much. It goes research, and then teaching, and then service, or sometimes it's even research, teaching, service, and then teaching. They don't like to say that, but sometimes that's the case. Which means that at a Research One, you teach a significantly lower class load. I know people. I think sometimes I would teach 4 or 5, which is 4 classes in the fall and 5 in the spring, or sometimes I teach 4 or 4. I was teaching a lot of classes, and then I was teaching a lot in the summer, just to make extra money, that kind of thing, and also freelancing a lot, which honestly at the end of the day was really good. And I was a one-person program too, so I was the only graphic design teacher, and so not only was I teaching the classes and restructuring the curriculum, but I was also the monitor for the classroom. At the time, they weren't funding us really well, and so it was really frustrating. And I helped, little by little, increase the numbers of the students there. And I don't know, it was a lot of work. It was great, and actually, and now, it's there's a couple of gentlemen that are working there that have kind of carrying on some of the things that I helped lay the groundwork for, and so that's really exciting. So. I don't know. It's when I go and I look at the work now, I'm looking at they're in a new building. There's a lot of interesting things going on there. As far as just what's going on with the students, and I don't know. I feel proud of what's been going on in the art program there. But I think that for myself, that I've been able to actually, to a certain degree, help indirectly, still help Jackson State. I actually have an art show up there at Jackson State right now about the blues called Thief at the Crossroads. That's going to be up till January. And I don't know. I think that where I am, I'm actually more equipped to actually do more mentorship at the spaces that I'm able to kind of get into now. And so that's kind of, and it's been laid on my heart that I should do mentoring a lot more. And so that's what I've been trying to do as much as I possibly can, which includes helping young artists, facilitating shows, that kind of thing, or trying to, read over people's manuscripts, or whatever I could do to try to, in my spare time, so to speak, to try to help out is what I've been trying to focus on, along with my own work. So, yeah. But to answer your questions, I think I really don't have a tie to a particular space. I love home, but I'm really connected to people, instead of spaces. So I miss my friends a lot in Champaign. I made a lot of very strong allies and friends in Champaign, and I was born and raised in Mississippi. But it's you really can't maneuver. Sometimes you can't maneuver well when you're grounded like that. Sometimes you do have to go out and and do a few things. And so I think that's what I've been trying to do. Do I want to go back south? I'm not really sure. I'm not really sure. I just and again, you're right. I can work in different places, and I do work. I work in Buffalo, but I work for people all over the world. And that's really cool because of technology. But and even with Buffalo, Buffalo's a cool space. It's actually like baby Chicago. It reminds me of being in the Midwest. That's what I got. It's very much a blue collar town. It's kind of de-industrialized right now, and it's kind of on the come up, on the comeback. So people are doing some grassroots things there, and it's a really strong arts community there, and it's really strong arts and performance, like theater, and music as well too. And so it has that kind of vibrant kind of like, hey, we're doing some things here kind of thing. And the cost of living is awesome. So, you know, there's that. So, I don't know. I mean, I think it's a really interesting space, but for me to function, I just need really like to feel comfortable and to have some connection with some kind of, you know, intelligentsia that's like on the ground there, like talking to my colleagues, or you know, having a space where I can actually kind of fellowship and talk about these ideas, or also having internet connection, you know, so I can get my stuff done. So, you know, that's about all I need. I mean, I'm really kind of like, I'm really kind of Spartan in that regard, which is about to change, you know, because I'm about to get married, so I'm going to have other concerns jumping off, right?
Yeah. Is this your first marriage?
It is. Actually.
Yeah, I always tell everybody should try it at least once. Well, I mean, you know, some people do it a number of times. Some people do it once and it doesn't work. Some people are happy, you know, ever after.
Right.
You know, relationships are hard. I think they're harder than business because it requires more out of you, and which leads me to ask, you know, have you worked in partnerships with other people to the extent that you had, you know, a close working relationship that you had to make work, or up until now, have you pretty much been working as a loner?
Oh, you know, no, I actually collaborate quite a bit. You know, probably like my first like major collaborator, as far as like just recently, is Damian Duffy. You know, we've been working together. Oh my goodness, like 8 years, and he always jokes that I keep like adding years on top of it whenever someone asks me. But yeah, it's like 12 years. No, it's kidding. But it's probably like 8 years actually. And we met at University of Illinois, and you know, Damian's one of my best friends, but he also is a really, really strong collaborator. It's like we're very like-minded about a lot of the stories we want to do. You know, we work really well together. We get stuff done. You know, our politics are very similar, you know, as far as how we think about diversity in comics. And it's one of the reasons why I think that we've been able to kind of move forward, you know. Damian still actually lives in Champaign. He's working on his dissertation now for a PhD in library information science, and which is really awesome. And then more recently, I've forged a really strong friendship and working relationship with Stacey Blackstar Robinson, and you know, that's really been great too. And I think probably like all of us are going to end up doing projects together too. I mean, it's just kind of inevitable, you know. But Stacey is who I created the Black Kirby moniker with, you know. So Black Kirby is like me and Stacey Robinson, you know. So it's like the one who is two, you know, that kind of thing, right? And so yes, I can elaborate more on that later if you want. But it's like, so those are two of the most immediate ones. Actually, I collaborate with Dr. Stanford Carpenter quite a bit on different projects as well, and also, as I mentioned earlier, Dr. Ronaldo Anderson is another collaborator, and also, more recently, I've been kind of doing some stuff with Nydia Corafor as well, the very talented science fiction writer, who is actually right now based in Chicago at Chicago State. So, but those are some people I can rattle off the top of my head. I want to say that all the projects that we worked on have been collaborative. I mean, if you look at like the first shows that Damian and I did, I mean, it is a collaboration with a lot of people, you know. And so on the ground, you know, it's the two of us kind of pulling things together. But you know, you also have these, you know, these ancillary people that you're working with at all times. Also, too, I mean, I look at what Bill and Bill and Ed did as a collaborative piece too. I mean, they count me as a collaborator as well for the Mothership Project, you know, which you know, I think I was really proud to be a part of, and I intend to continue working with Rosario in the near future too. So, yeah.
You're listening to the Genesis Science Fiction Radio Show, a service of the Black Science Fiction Society.com website. This is the November 29th, 2013 edition, and our special guest is John Jennings, a graphic artist and an educator. which is it's nice. I mean, it's nice that you obviously mentor other people. You're giving back. You know, when I mentor, I just call it paying it forward, because people who helped me out didn't necessarily stick around to get anything back. You know, that was just their nature. You know, and you know what? When I think back to asking you about collaborations, when you do work for hire, I mean, that's just as collaborative as anything else, because what you're doing is you're having to work out an idea and to take that idea, whatever the idea is, and create a visual impression that should lead you to do that. I love the cover of Natasha Womack's book, Afrofuturism, that you did. And let people know where on the internet they can go to take a look at the best of what you've done. Where would they go to check that out?
Oh man, actually, if you do a Google search for CJ Adventures, because I don't have the the Tumblr page is probably like the best way to go.
Okay.
I don't have the direct link to it memorized, actually, because when I was coming up with it, I was just going to use my name. So it's something crazy like J.I. Jennings 70 or something at Tumblr.
Well, hang on. Do a search for CJ Adventures.
Yeah, CJ. So it's SEEJAY Adventures. Yeah, and it should probably pop up, but that's my Tumblr page. And so that's where I kind of post a lot of my stuff. You can find me on Twitter, too, at J.I. Jennings. Yeah, and that's a good place to kind of find some things. I post a lot of stuff on Facebook, but also, Damien and I have a pretty robust Facebook fan page for the Black Comix book. And again, I don't know the direct link to it, but if you look on Facebook for like Black Comix and you spell it COMIX, which is that kind of like the underground spelling,
right?
You'll find a lot of stuff that we're posting and things of that nature. But as far as like my work, and of course there's Stacy and I have a Society 6 page, which I think is just BK3030 at society6.com or something like that. It's where we put our Black Kirby stuff. So that's a good place to look as well.
All right. So if people can do a search for Black Kirby.
Yeah, and all that stuff will pop up. And we also have a catalog available for the show, which is available on Amazon and through Ingram book distributors. So, if you want to order it from a bookstore, that kind of thing, you can find it through Ingram. And then, of course, Damien and I have several books out of our work, including our first graphic novel, which is called The Whole Consumer Culture, and then there's also the Out of Sequence catalog is out there, and Other Heroes, actually, I think, as a book is available, for free now, I think. So you can find that.
Sure.
Yeah, and, of course, Black Comix, which is still available. So those are some of the places you can find me. Honestly, too, if you go to the University of Buffalo website and you look me up, in the Visual Studies program, I have a direct link to my my Tumblr page right there, too. So, I'm out there. You can find me. So I don't have a direct website, and people always, mess with me about that. But the thing is that, I've been fortunate enough to create a way of working that's very quick, and so I make a lot of work, and so it's really, by the time I put up a website, it's already out of date. So the Tumblr page works for me quite nicely because I can just kind of keep it updated, and kind of tumble through images. So very rarely will I think there might be one image of someone else's or something like that, but for the most part, it's all my stuff, Yeah.
Well, I mean, given your life, the gestalt of your life, it's not like you have an overriding necessity to go out there and market yourself in the way many independents do. I mean, you're I don't want to say you're primarily an educator, but that's where you've landed, and that's it's not like you're a commercial artist who's 100% devoted to selling your art, It is, so your situation is going to be a little different.
That's true.
And I noticed here that you're working on a second graphic novel. What was the first graphic novel you did?
The one that we're working on that we did before is called The Whole Consumer Culture, Volume 1. Okay. Actually, it needs to be completed. That was plotted by Damien and myself, written by Damien Duffy, and lettered by Damien Duffy, and illustrated and designed by myself. It was actually published locally. It was published in Chicago by Front 40 Press, which is a local kind of like really, boutique press owned by Doug Fogelson, who is an amazing guy, photographer and artist and publisher. And so, yeah, we just kind of stumbled into a working relationship with him. I mean, I wrote a piece for a book that he published called Graphitecture, which is on like graffiti and architecture. And we just kept in touch, and I just showed him some of the stuff from the whole, and, he was like, hey, come up. And so we drove up, and we had a meeting with him, and then with him and his gang, and, before you knew it, he was like, yeah, we're going to publish this. And we're like, wait, what? So we're going to put it out ourselves. We're going to just do it ourselves, and so, and it's a pretty wild book. I mean, it's kind of like a critique of late capitalism but through a racialized lens of looking at like the buying and selling of like kind of black culture,
Sure.
And simultaneous like demonization of it too. So it's kind of a horror science fiction like parody kind of thing, or horror sci-fi satire is what we say it is. But it actually it's a head trip. It's drawn in a very different fashion that I'm used to drawing, and it's very crude and kind of almost like living graffiti. It's very like grimy. So it's like
sure.
Yeah, but people seem to dig it. People have taught it in universities, and seem to be a fan of the character. A lot of people want to see the second part. We want to do that, but it's like, what ends up happening is Damien and I get caught up with other things. I think at the time Damien only had he was just getting married and found his first house and was pre-kid, and now he's like 2 kids later, and now he's up to his eyeballs and like writing a dissertation. Not to mention, a couple other projects that we're trying to get off the ground. So it's been very difficult to go back to the whole, so to speak. But I'm very proud of it at the same time. I mean, people, responded to it in this very interesting way. It's very meta, very, very hyper postmodernist, and it also comes with because we're both academics, it comes with like a teaching guide and, a bibliography and, a glossary of terms and stuff like that. So it's very teachable too. Yeah. So yeah. So anyway, so that was our first joint. And so let's see, our next project, which we're very honored to be working on, is we landed the opportunity to adopt Kindred into a graphic novel. So that's our next project that we're working on right now together, and it's for Abrams Comic Arts, and it's due out next year. And currently, they should be sending us notes on Damien's manuscript, and which she admirably put together. I mean, we were talking about it since writing it, and it's like I didn't know how he was going to pull it out, but it came together. It's 230 pages, and the entire novel, and it's going to be full color, and I'm looking forward to really getting into that. So that's exciting, and of course there's Blue Hand Mojo, which is a project that I actually won a fellowship from the University of Buffalo to work on, which is kind of a I call it a hoodoo whodunit because it's it's if you can imagine like Evie Rollins and John Constantine smooshed together. This would be the character Frank Johnson, Half Dead Johnson. He was a fictitious cousin of Robert Johnson, and so it's set in the 1930s in Bronzeville, Chicago, and it's kind of like a supernatural murder mystery to a certain degree, or the supernatural mystery. And yes, I've been working on that, and right now a publisher's looking at it. I'm not really sure if they're going to publish it or not, but after that, I'm probably going to, depending upon what they do, if they don't want to deal with the project, then I'm probably just going to put it out myself, So, I'm very much into independent publishers. You could probably tell that by the name of our website and by the type of work that we do. We're very much into agency of, creators put out their own stuff,
Right.
And, and also, as much as I love superheroes, I mean, I do think that they dominate the market a little, well, not even a little, a lot. They're to the point where when people think American comics, they think either like funny animals or superheroes, and
sure,
and so I have we both have like a serious issue with that, So yeah.
Yeah, let me ask you something. I'm going to put up a link to Ytasha Womack's Afrofuturism book.
Mm-hmm.
Could you maybe just describe, a little bit how, what's your process in terms of creativity? And obviously, it's going to be different for every project. I mean, nothing's going to be the same. But if you can maybe, describe a little bit of, your thinking behind, the way you do what you do.
Yeah. That's actually it's multivalent, like you're saying. I mean, I'm trained as a classical artist, so I draw a lot. I mean, I draw like a lot, so I'm always sketching. Some people sketch in sketchbooks. For some reason, I tend to sketch on loose paper, so I have like stacks and stacks of loose paper. It's funny because I've never carried really. I mean, I used to carry a sketchbook when I was in undergrad. There's so many different reasons, but since then I've actually I enjoy drawing on loose paper. So I draw. I don't really draw on expensive paper either. I use like really cheap art supplies. Like I'll use like Sharpies, and I'll use like because at the end of the day I know that my final process is going to be digital. So it's like I just need to get an impression of what the image looks like. I'm really into hip hop as well as a culture. I teach a class called the Visual Culture of Hip Hop, which I created at the University of Illinois, and it's kind of migrated with me to Buffalo. I'll be teaching again in the spring, but I mention that because I look at what I do, and actually to a certain degree, I think all knowledge is made like this. It's like sampling and remixing, So a lot of it is like, we're inspired by these different things, and we kind of like, copy them and add them to our repertoire. People are so like, I created this original thing. I was like, yeah, that's not original. Sorry. You didn't come up with that. You've been influenced by all this other stuff, and you really need to know your antecedents to understand where you're coming from, Almost already thought of all the stuff that we've been thinking about. But, and this is one of the reasons why I always teach my students to try and be individuals is that the only factor that's really very different is you. I mean, you're the new thing, So let's try to be as you as humanly possible, right? So I call myself a CJ, SEEJAY, just like my my Tumblr. So it's like I'm sampling and remixing things, and so I'll sample myself, I'll sample other things, I'm influenced by a lot of different artists. And sometimes you can see my influence, and sometimes maybe not so much. I mean, it was really like Black Kirby is just one big sample, obviously, but it's it has a more political bent to a certain degree. But what I do is like I draw a lot of stuff by hand, and then I'll actually use like images sometimes, or and everything's digital though. Like all my coloring is digital. I actually use textures a lot in my work that I made maybe like 8 years ago. Like I have like stacks and stacks of just like scanned in textures that I made by hand. Which is funny because one of my influences is Alex Nally's. I don't know if you know his work or not. They used to work on Daredevil and Avengers and stuff like that. He's a printmaker. And so I was taught by a printmaker myself, Tom Kovacs, who was my professor at University of Illinois. And so he's a woodblock artist. So a lot of people when they see my work, they think lino cut, or they think like some kind of printing process. And I think I make work like a printmaker, because my process is very reductive, So I actually, what I'll do is I'll do a sketch of something, get it into the computer, and I actually put like a gray background behind it. And then what I start doing is I start taking away what I don't need. So it's almost like a sculpting process, which it's almost like I'm chipping away. It's a drawing process, but I'm kind of like pulling the image out, And then I add color and texture, and I was trained by a painter as far as the colors go. Willie Cook, was one of my professors at Jackson State. He was an amazing color theory teacher. But people, compliment me on my color quite a bit, and it's, I have nothing to do with it. It's because of him, because he drilled color theory into our heads. So I just don't slap colors onto, a blank file, I work from the grays. I work from the color, from the underlying tones first. And so basically, I build on top of that. And so what happens is you get like a richer color and a richer palette, and sometimes to a certain degree a truer palette that you're working with when you're working with your tones first. So I always tell my students to work with the grays first, But anyway, so so I work like that. I use the Wacom tablet, which is a digitizing tablet it's the Intuos. I use the Intuos version of it. I don't have a Cintiq. I actually almost got a Cintiq, but for the price of the Cintiq, I was like, man, I can get a new computer. So I opted to get a new computer. So instead, which I'm glad I made that decision. And because I know that when you get a Cintiq, you can't go backwards. So it's like, which is a Cintiq it's a drawing tablet that is the screen. So you're drawing directly on the screen. Yeah. Just for your listeners who might not know. And then, so I use Photoshop. Actually, I draw in Photoshop now, which is crazy because I hate Photoshop back in the day. I've been using it for a long time. And so this version is so sensitive to the touch that, I don't really need to use anything but Photoshop for my drawings. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's all in Photoshop. I might take it over to Painter sometimes. I used to work a lot in Painter, like classic Painter. But I've found that for some reason this newer Painter doesn't respond as well to me, and which I'm kind of sad about. And I hate like upgrades that make the program like less useful to me. But the upgrade to Photoshop was very useful, So I'm using like I think it's Creative Suite 5 or 6 or something like that. But that's what I worked in, and so I work at high resolution, and usually I do stuff panel by panel. A lot of artists work page by page, but because you're working digitally, I really like the idea of using the affordances of the medium, to work. So I find myself using the fact that I can work large and I can get more details. Or if I want to say, for instance, if I want to do like a really detailed drawing in the background, I can scan it in and work on that really fine detail, like large, and then scale it down. If you look at the whole, for instance, it's really dense because of that. So all the drawings in the whole pretty much are like hand drawn and then scanned in. You can, like, sometimes one panel will have like 10 images, separate images in it. So I'll spend time like composing images and stuff like that. So the whole idea is like, well, you're working digital, so why not just use that as part of your process, right? So it
sounds like the transition from analog to digital was not a difficult one for you.
Well, because of, I think because being a designer, I think about problem solving first. Like what's the best way to do this? Damien, we were at the Festival for Cartoon Art. I don't know if people know or not, but Ohio State has the largest repository of comics and sequential art in the country, and it just opened a new research library called the Billy Ireland Comics and Research. I think it's called Comics Research Library, but it's pretty much the Church of Comics. It's this massive structure that's a museum and also like an archive. And so Eddie Campbell was speaking, and from the artist that worked on From Hell, Alan Moore, and other like a bunch of other projects. And so he was one of the guests who was talking about his process, and he uses digital work now. He's like, and he makes a really good point. The reason why we used to make why you would draw these giant ink images, like pen and ink images, was because of the production process. So I mean, because it's just that now you don't have to do that. Like, for instance, you can actually draw something in pencil and just scan it in, and then and then make the image darker using levels in Photoshop and just color that. You don't have to make an ink image anymore. So you cut down your production process. And also, you can use sound image and collage and all these really funky things that can make the comic more rich and interesting depending upon what your story is, And of course, a lot of people are like kind of old school as far as like just how they work, but and because I'm coming to it as a graphic designer, I'm always thinking about, okay, so how can I do this layout different? How can I do this really interesting thing that I know that I can only do in a computer, because
Right.
There are certain things that you can do. Like, for instance, that's why I use texture and stuff, because there's certain happy accidents that computers just cannot duplicate, that the hand can pull in just because it's a hand, But then there's also things that you can do with digital that you can't even think about doing analog, So, I come from the best of both worlds. Being like Generation X, we started using computers. We're like, late adopters. Not late adopters. We're not native. We're coming in not speaking like the digital language, but we have to learn it. And so we understand the connection between the digital and the analog. So, and sometimes sometimes in a lot more intimate fashion than some of our younger counterparts,
Well, and the other thing that still applies is using the right tool for the right job.
Exactly.
I don't think that digital is going to be able to give you exactly what you want for every single circumstance that you're going to be doing artwork, and sometimes it takes an analog sketch to kind of help you solidify exactly what you're shooting for.
Oh yeah.
And then you can go from there.
Yeah, I always work with sketches. I always sketch by hand, from there.
Yeah. Now, you're scattered all over the Internet. You don't have your own website. And please,
Right.
I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm not, calling you out on that. But have you ever thought about, consolidating a body of your work and maybe putting it into a book?
Actually, I have a couple of art books out. There's one called Findings that I self-published through Lulu.com like years ago. I'm getting ready to drop another one pretty soon. It's going to be called Pitch Black Rainbow, and it's going to be through Bill Campbell's company, Rosarium, pretty soon. So, yeah, that's...
I'm sorry, repeat the first title. I didn't get it.
It's called Findings. That's the name of it.
Just Findings? Okay.
Yeah, it's called Findings, yeah. And
okay.
It's a bunch of stuff, and I put it out, I don't know, maybe 6 years ago? I don't even remember, honestly. When I discovered that you could put out books, yourself, I totally took advantage of that. So I actually have a lot of little self-published collections of things that I've done. I'm getting ready to put out probably a lot more stuff because I've been sitting on a lot of artwork, and Pitch Black Rainbow is going to be the first collection of my stuff in a long time. It's going to be more recent. It's probably about 100 pages,
Sure.
And going to put it out with Rosarium, the same press to put out the Mothership book, and see how that goes. As far as like having a site, I used to have a site a few years ago, and again I found like I actually had a couple of sites, and it's just like I was just making too much work, and I felt like I spent too much time trying to keep the site up to date. And now with Instagram and Tumblr and all these different things, my presence on the web, like it's just scattered, but actually I'm in a lot of spaces simultaneously because I have a pretty big like social networking footprint, yeah, which is kind of crazy. But yeah, and so that's why I look at it. So I don't know. I think the ethereal aspect of it fits me.
I did post up your Tumblr address, which is for those who will be listening to this as a podcast. It's a JIJENNIN 70.tumblr.com.
Yeah.
Which in there, I just took a quick look at it while I was listening, and you've got a nice body of work. I did mention that you did the cover of Ytasha Womack's book Afrofuturism, and just if you got a second, tell us. I mean, how did you? You knew the subject that she was writing about, things like that, and how did you go ahead and translate that into the image of the book?
Oh, okay. Well, what happened was Ytasha and I are good friends, and we had been like speaking together on some panels, and actually Ronaldo and I helped out with some of the aspects. Well, she interviewed me for the book, and I think this is after Black Kirby had kind of like started touring around at different spaces. And she actually talked to Stacey Robinson as well. And so when I sent over the Black Kirby images, they wanted to use some of them intermittendly in the in the book. And he looked through it. There's images from the show in the book. And so what ended up happening is the publisher wanted to use an image that I would generate for the cover. And so I agreed to do that, and we had a quick discussion about the cover design, and
right.
I did a digital sketch of what I was thinking, and they kind of wanted a basically what you saw. They pretty much wanted what you're seeing for the cover, pretty much.
Okay.
And so I did a really quick digital drawing of that, and sent it over. And I want to say that it was pretty much approved almost like on the spot, which was really, I love it when it happens, But I have been thinking about this work for a long time. I've been talking to Tasha about what the book was going to be about, and it needed to be something that was eye-catching and iconic, and but also indicative of, the type of story, the type of cultural creation that Afrofuturism is, So yeah, and so I just kind of went with that, and then once they approved it, I think I was going out of town at the time, and so once I got back in town, I just kind of finished it up and sent over the finished cover. I actually did a really quick typographic piece too, on the front cover and stuff, and they really loved it, and I was ecstatic, and it was done, So that's kind of like how it jumped off. I don't know. I mean, covers are difficult, but they're also fun, because they have to get across the idea really quickly and iconically, and they have to grab you. They're like mini posters,
Mm-hmm.
So you
sure.
think about
sure.
them, yeah, how do they stand out when they're stacked up against other book covers, or other illustrations on covers? So
yeah, and as much as people say, don't judge a book by its cover, people do. People look at that cover and they go, oh, this is interesting, this is intriguing, which the cover of her book is, and that does draw people into the consideration of a sale, far more
definitely.
than anybody wants to let you know. Everybody wants to think of it as an intellectual exercise. Well, I know this author and I like the way they do X, Y, or Z, but that cover does make a big difference.
Yeah, it totally does. I mean, it's marketing. In fact, a lot of times, when you're working in the publishing industry, they want the cover way before the book is even finished. Sometimes,
Yeah,
because they can start putting it into catalogs, into pre-orders and things of that nature. So yeah, it makes total sense. And yes, philosophically, yes, you should read the book. But we're a very image-driven society, which is why I'm so interested in how images construct identity and things of that nature. So it's kind of like drives a lot of the work that I do in the academy. But so I'm really pleased that people love that cover. I was like, oh, okay, great. Well, yeah. I know one of my favorite covers is the Mothership cover too. That image came to me, and it just kind of came out, and Bill and Ed really just kind of liked it immediately, and with some tweaks. But still, I mean, it was very fortunate that those two covers came together so quickly.
Yeah. And so how do you, well, tell you what, hang on, let me do this real quick. You're listening to the Genesis Science Fiction Radio Show, a service of the BlackScienceFictionSociety.com website. This is the November 29th edition, 2013, and John Jennings is our special guest for this evening, educator and artist, and I would even say author, because you have done some of that one-stop stuff for doing marketing, haven't you?
Oh yeah, definitely. Well, also, like for Blue Hand Mojo, I'm doing I'm handling the writing chores on that as well, and I don't know, and I'll come up with these crazy ideas a lot too, like just story prompts and things, and I would prefer to work with people who are writers, but it's just sometimes I could see the story so clearly, and I don't know. I mean, it's for comics. It's kind of like a collaborative writing kind of piece to a certain degree. Yeah, and a lot of times, I'll come up with an idea and I'll pitch it to Damien, and then or to Stacy or whoever I'm working with, and Damien will kind of massage it. It's like, oh, well, we tried this. And I was like, oh, that sounds great, And then before you know it, we have this crazy story going. Definitely authorship is something I'm really into as well. I just know a lot of stories. I'm fortunate, and sometimes to a certain degree, unfortunate enough to have so many ideas, that I I'm kind of like sitting on a pile of stories that I'm lamenting that maybe will never get done. So, but I'm trying to like tier them and actually again pitch them to people if they want to work on them with me and stuff like that. It's really kind of cool. So, but yeah, I mean, I definitely think that there's different levels of authorship that is very much a part of what I do.
And so when you teach a class, let's say this is kind of like not a beginning class in art, but let's say you're talking about a mid-level class where you're not only trying to convey the skills that are the requisite skills and fundamentals that an artist should have, but when you talk about conveying ideas and things like that, how do you approach that with your students? What do you think the crux of your teaching argument is, and how effective do you think it's been?
Well, at the heart of it, my teaching is about understanding image. I think that when we talk about literacy, we're still very much dealing with reading and writing, which is extremely important, of course, But I think that we have a very old-fashioned notion of what literacy really is, and so I kind of come from that. I teach in a graphic design program, so I know how powerful images are. We see them every day, and why is it that that type of media literacy or image literacy isn't taught in schools readily? You have to go to college, pretty much. I really don't see a lot of that changing in the school system because they're trying to get the basics together. But what's happened is the basics have changed. And so a lot of the class that I teach right now is called semiotics, which is the study of signs, and visual rhetoric. So the whole class is modeled after this idea of thinking about image as a way of creating an argument, or conveying meaning, And so I think that we still live in a very logocentric world, but we don't live in a very logocentric world. If anything, I barely see image not married to text, and vice versa. And so, you see image and text flowing freely in our advertisements, in our books, and on our television, and people aren't really taught how to deal with those types of being bombarded that way. And so I think that I teach from that particular standpoint. The other thing I teach about is the fact that there's no such thing as a monolithic view of anything,
Right.
We live in a very diverse culture, and so I try to teach my students to actually have an open mind about your audience. Your audience is shifting constantly, and so research is always paramount to get across an idea. There's no like quick fix. I think something else that kind of bothers me about graphic design is the fact that just in general, capitalism hides process. We don't know where things come from. We just kind of see them. They pop up in a store. They go, I'm going to get this iPhone. They don't know about the people who toiled over getting the minerals for that iPhone. They don't know about the systems. They don't know about the trucker who had to ship that iPhone to you. We just see this product, right? Same thing with images. We just see the final image. We don't know about like what art director had to be fired to get that image out, or how long a junior designer had to work, and hang out with his family to get that thing done. And we consume through images. We're very ocular-centric. We have that what they call it, the scopophilic instinct, right? Where you're going first with the eye, and that's how we consume things, and that's how we covet things. That's how we create desire, And so I come from that particular standpoint. It's a very theoretical space. And for instance, right now, like I said before, Dr. Adelifu Nama and myself, who I would count as another collaborator, he teaches at Loyola Marymount University, and we're putting together a symposium on Afrofuturism called Astro Blackness, remixing Black identity now, future, now and then. I forget the whole time. Astro Blackness is the main piece, and it's about looking at Black identity through science fiction. Anyway, so my students are designing pieces that are going to be in a commemorative book that are going to be given to the speakers at this event, right? And so I teach mostly, working class, white and Asian students for the most part. for some reason there's a bunch of there's about 7 Black students in that class, and so what's interesting is I changed the overall theme for the class every year. So this year it's race as science fiction, right? So we've been looking at semiotics through this kind of racialized lens, like looking at the biological, kind of like falsehood of race being like a signifier of difference, and also looking at the social constructions of race, and how that plays out and how we actually construct ideas about identity, the other. We also look at gender and class as well, and so that's what I teach. I teach from this very theoretical space. My projects are usually open-ended. I'll give them enough time and space to actually work on projects, but I definitely want them to bring their own experiences to the table. And, we try to have pretty open discussions about these issues in class, but basically because we're talking about Afrofuturism, they have to understand a little bit about critical race theory, a little bit about white privilege. They have to understand, male privilege. They have to look at we have to look at class as well, because all these things play off each other, and that's the way I make work, and that's the way I want them to be very informed. I always tell them that basically their best art making tool should always be their minds. It should be like razor sharp, and they should understand that when you're creating an image, you're creating it from an ethical space. You're not just like graphic go boys and go girls. You're not just hands for some other greater space. You're a thinker and you're a maker of a particular politic as well. Because images are very political. They're just inherently also. And so whose images are being pushed? That kind of thing. Yeah.
It sounds to me like what you're doing is you're trying to fill the void where in most cases people who teach art don't teach the language of art. And, they teach the fundamentals, or they'll and what you're doing sounds more like trying to get these people to look at art and artistic endeavor from the perspective of saying something, telling a story, something more than just the straight-on visuals.
Right. No, that's exactly right. I'm an educator. I'm not. I think what's happened with just the privatization of everything. I mean, education is being privatized left and right, and so, we come into the university with it being, I don't teach at a trade school. I mean, there is this notion of graphic design being a very trade space, and that there are places that teach it from a very portfolio-centric, kind of ideology too, where you come in and you have the Photoshop class and you have the Illustrator class, right? That kind of thing. And those are just tools, and it's very form-based, and oh my God, the stuff that comes out of those particular spaces are beautiful, pretty, spaces, and so they're making designers who pretty much are going to become cogs in a larger marketing scheme or marketing system. Whereas, if you go to a university, I want you to be well-rounded. I want you to actually be able to make an argument. I want you to be able to write. I want you to know history. I want to know why you're making the things that you're making from all standpoints, and who you're affecting by the images that you're making, So I think that I really believe that education is supposed to make you a better person, and also make you a productive citizen. In fact, I tell them I'm trying to make them into citizen designers, basically designers, citizens who happen to be designers, and not the other way around, Yeah.
Have you gotten any pushback on that approach at all?
Oh yeah, all the time. All the time. Yeah.
More so from maybe administration than students, or do you get it from students as well?
Well, here's the thing. I think that when I was at University of Illinois, I think that I had more pushback from administration. I love U of I, but I think that there's a lot of stuff to be done with how they deal with diversity and how they deal with the way that they see themselves. I think that that particular institution, it's trying to change, but and become more inclusive. But I think that institutions are, by their very nature, they don't change very quickly. Hence, like I said, I was the first African American to get tenure in art in 2008, right? So that kind of idea. It's so that space as far as challenging the status quo. I mean, that particular design program for many years was very much about the modernist movement, which was about similarity and not about showing difference, And so anyone who's coming in there who's trying to do something that's a little bit different, a little bit off kilter, you're definitely going to push back, right?
Yeah.
And so I think, honestly, one of the things I like about UP is that the students, we have, if anything, we have one thing in common in particular, the fact that we're very much working class, and that if you're putting yourself through school, like I did and like a lot of these students are that I'm teaching, they value, I think, the education a lot more. They understand what it means to be discriminated against. They understand that there are other spaces that they don't have privy to. And so I think that I've had far less pushback, at UP than I did before, in some of my other spaces. I think that in the long run, the students who I did teach at U of I, who were like-minded, who actually understood where I was coming from, I think that they already, that's just a given. I think that a lot of students don't understand that me giving you an answer is not me being a good teacher, because I think this generation that we were teaching, they're used to like getting answers from like buttons, that kind of stuff.
Right.
And so, I can tell you what I think, but that's not what you should be thinking. You should be trying to make your own mind about it. And so I tend to make projects that are very difficult that don't have a straightforward answer, and it drives them crazy. And so they look at that as like that's bad teaching, right? Because they don't know what the final answer is, because no one ever has given a damn to ask them what they thought about something,
Right.
So anyway,
how many times did you hear, "Will this be on the test"?
Oh yes,
they a lot of people, a lot of students treat the educational process as a results-oriented affair, and not a matter of learning at all.
Right. No, it drives me crazy. And so what I do is I try to problematize tests. Even like actually in my design history class, we do projects. It's project based, which drives.
Right.
I've seen people drop out of the class. So and it doesn't make any sense to teach a class like that to artists. And even design, and even people who are historians should actually make art too. What I'm saying? Because there's a totally different way of using a prime. And it drives me crazy that the visual arts are considered like so non-essential. Every time you look around, people are talking about STEM, which is science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And when I talked to my friend Natrice Gaskin, she's been pushing STEAM, right? So science, technology, engineering, art, and mathematics. And so I'm on that boat, because even Einstein said that it's more important to what do you say? I'm just about to jack up this quote. Imagination is more important than knowledge. That's the
yeah, but see, the thing is that you've got a movement in this country where they don't want to teach anybody the art of reasoning. Okay?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, you want.
They yeah, exactly. They do, and then students are so stupid. They buy into it because they don't see the larger picture,
I don't know about stupid. I would say ignorant.
But that's because you're a much more polite individual than I am. I have no manners, but we could call it ignorance because they don't see the bigger picture. Right. But the fact of the matter is, let's take some really bad examples. And it's not just the students; it's the parents as well, because they're all looking for that results-oriented experience where so-and-so, little Johnny, little Sarah, little whoever has to have the right grade in order to get X, and they don't realize that X is not the be-all, end-all, because that's all they're concerned with. You have a teacher in Iowa, high school teacher, high school, and she made students and parents sign a contract that their kids would not plagiarize off the internet. Okay. For their final paper. All right. Came the time when the kids turned in their papers, she had this online teaching tool that allows you to go ahead and find out very, very quickly if somebody plagiarized off the internet. And she failed over half the students in her class because they had done what they were not supposed to do, and their parents had signed a contract to that. Well, the parents got all up in arms, and the first thing they did was they went to the principal
School
and
board?
said, no, no, the principal. You have to make her change the grades. And the principal stood behind the teacher. Then they went to the school board, and the school board relented and told the teacher that she had to change the grades. She refused and got fired. Okay? So, you know, the educational process is tough. I mean, you chose a tough, you know, a career path or a tough a way to go. But the students who get it have got to make you feel 100 times more rewarded, because what you've given them is something not only that will last a lifetime, but something that will contribute to them not only being better artists but being better people. So I mean, I could see you doing it, but it's still a tough road to hoe.
Yeah, I think so, definitely. But you know, for me, it's the only space. You know, I like I said, I started out in marketing, and
right.
And so, you know, that kind of idea, and it just seemed like it wasn't. Sorry, we got dogs going. My bad.
No, it's okay. But the other the B part to what you do that should be very inspiring to your students is the fact that not only do you teach, but you do. You know, it's not a case of, you know, he's teaching us, he's trying to tell us how to do X, and, you know, but you can turn right around and say, hey, look, here's something that I did that illustrates the process, not necessarily what it is that they're supposed to do, but here's how the process worked. Here's how it worked for me, and it was financially rewarding. So, you know, you're teaching by example, not by rote, or not by, you know, merely forcing them to, you know, is this going to be on the test? You know, so that's to be admired. I mean, just between you. No, I'm serious. I couldn't do it. You know, I taught a lot, and I taught at all levels, elementary, high school, and college. And it takes a special person to be able to buck the tide. You know, I was teaching, you know, race-based sociology classes in Green Bay, Wisconsin, of all kinds of places. And that's a city where black folks get treated well or poorly depending upon how well the Green Bay Packers are doing that year. Okay?
Huh. Wow.
So, you know, I think, I mean, it sounds like you're probably going to be teaching for most of the rest of your life. I mean, it doesn't sound like anything that you want to get out of.
No, I don't think so. I mean, I really enjoy the teaching aspect. I mean, it to teach is to learn twice, so to speak. And I don't know. I think that it's a calling as well. And even in the work that I do, I mean, there's a teaching aspect to it. You know, there's always like an underlying theme or something that's kind of get at something around social issues. You know, I think it's just kind of where I come from. And so when I was working as at the software company, it was just I loved working there, but it just seemed like there had to be more. You know. Yeah. And so I think that even though I could probably make it double the amount of money in marketing, or I'd probably be like a vice president of art or an artist.
Sure. Oh yeah.
That kind of thing. Whatever. I mean, I'd probably be like an art director. Or, I don't know. Whatever.
Yeah, director of digital marketing or whatever. Sure.
Something. Yeah, but it's like it's just I don't know. When it comes at me, I was like, okay, how is that really bettering society, or is there a way to do both? You know. Because honestly, like the system that we work in is like really it's badly designed. You know, it's not sustainable. You know, and we can't keep making things the way that we make things and exploiting people the way we do. You know. So
I mean, look what they did to the middle class in this country. They took away the middle class, and then they're wondering why nobody's buying their things anymore.
I know, right? Yeah.
You know, it's like
silly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like
how come people aren't buying a new car every 2 years or every 3 years like they used to? Well, because you ain't paying them anything. So
right.
Now, before we got on the air, you mentioned you do visit some of these conventions and things like that. How when you go to these conventions and you meet people who are familiar with your work. What's that like? What are they kind of, what are they jazzed about in meeting you? Just the fact they're meeting the guy who does X, Y, or Z? Or, do you take some time to talk about what you do, maybe even mentor some people? What kind of experience is the convention circuit for you?
Well, it's funny because I don't, I'm, as you said before, I mean, I do mostly I do a lot of academic conventions and stuff. I'm just now getting back into doing, the cons and stuff. And
sure.
I don't know, it's a little bit of both. I mean, I do try to mentor as much as possible. I remember this one time I was at a convention, and this woman, she just wanted to shake my hand. She was like, I follow you on Facebook, and I love your work, and I just want to say, hey, this is at I want to say it was at Colapon, And I was like, man, it's funny because you I was thinking about the way that you kind of framed the advertisement, just visual arts giant, and I was like, oh, who is that? I don't know who that is. But I think that eventually, one of these days, I aspire to be that, and I appreciate it. But I think mostly, there's this conversation about the work. Or I remember bumping into a gentleman at C2E2, and we just had a conversation about what I do and what Damien and I have done with Black Comics and that kind of thing. So I think it's mostly this. It's just hey, you're John Jennings, and I follow you on this site or what have you, and I like your work, and thanks for what you do. And so that's very empowering, and I think that's really cool. I'm going to be at Mysticon in Roanoke, Virginia, in late February, and I'll be, I'm designing their T-shirts, and I'm doing I'm their guest artist, and I'm doing panels and stuff, and so that's really cool because I'll be the guest artist, which is very different. It's a smaller con, but very very cool, And then of course I've been doing some stuff with San Diego Comic-Con quite recently. For instance, I was in the Black panel, Michael Davis's Black panel last year, and that was really cool because I got a chance to be in that space with a lot of people who who dig the work, and I got a chance to talk about some of the projects. So I don't know. I think it varies from con to con, but most of the time when I'm at the academic conventions, it's colleagues who might dig the work, and we talk about it from that space. But I really get jazzed and excited when people recognize me and understand where I'm coming from with the work that I make. Because the way that I make stuff is I'm not a mainstream artist, I make
right.
Unconventional stuff. So yeah.
Oh man, I had a great question too, and being old, I forgot.
Tell me about it.
Well, one of the things. Oh, I know what it was. For those of you who are listening, either now or later, as the podcast, I did extract a promise from John to start posting up his appearances where he will be at the BSFS website on the events calendar. So if you're out and about traveling the country, or maybe you're going to one of these conventions, hopefully we can get our entire stable of creatives to put up when they're going to be someplace so that you can check them out if you're going to one of these events and you don't miss them.
Yeah. I have stuff just popping up everywhere. I mean, for instance, I mentioned earlier that Stacy and I were approached by this gentleman who is a curator at Bucknell University in Pennsylvania. Right. And they're doing an Afrofuturism show, and they want to have some Black Kirby stuff in there. And so, we're going to have stuff in there, which is really cool. The Milestones exhibition is jumping off in actually December. So very simple. It's going to be December 13th, I think is when opening is. But, there's some pieces that were selected to be in that, and that's in Baltimore. I'll post on this stuff, I mean, and some things kind of pop up, sporadically. Other things just, things that have been in the works for a while. Like, for instance, Black Kirby's next show is going to be in Florida at Rollins College.
Right.
Yeah, and so that's going to be cool. I want to say that's late January. We have to work out the details with that.
Well, I mean, just, anytime you think you're going to be someplace, go ahead and post it up. Did you mention, I'm sorry, I for forgetting, but did you think that you may be coming to 2014 C2E2 here in Chicago?
Yeah, it's a good chance. It depends on how things work out with the conference schedule and with my overall schedule. I'm working on a lot of stuff, this year, because I'm going to be making a lot of work. I've been talking to a good friend of mine, Damon Lauren Baker, who is basically like he's a lot of things. He's a computer programmer. He's a digital artist. He's a teacher, and so we're working on some stuff too with Black Kirby. So we might be launching that stuff around the same time. I'm not really sure yet. So it depends on how things. He's at City University of New York, City Tech, and so we're probably going to be like doing a lot of projects together. So that's another collaborator that I forgot to mention earlier. So it depends. But I definitely would love to make it back. I've actually made quite a few of them. I was at this one last year, and I think I missed one before, but I've been to most of them at C2E2. So I like C2E2 a lot too. So,
if you come here, I definitely want to meet you. As I tell everybody, assuming I can get the ankle bracelet off, I'm there. Because it's over 50 feet from my house.
Right. That's hilarious.
Do you like travel? I mean, obviously you like the part about being able to meet people who at least recognize you and know your art, or even kindred spirits. How do you like travel? Is that kind of cool for you? You like heading out, going different places?
People think that I do. I really, I'm ambivalent travel. I really, it becomes like kind of,
sure.
I'm like, I got to go, and I got to go to these places, And like my friend Stacy Blackstein, from Black Kirby, has always met for me. It's like, I got to go to Paris, and I got to go to, he's always making fun of me. Your life is so hard. Shut up, that kind of thing, right? But I don't know. I think that I like traveling with people,
Yeah.
My wife to be she's really into travel, so maybe we can go to some of these places together. I think it'll be a different experience, and
sure.
Looking forward to that. But for the most part, I'd rather be at home working. More of a homebody, but I know that you can't be a homebody and do the stuff that I do. So. So I saw like it enough, but you're right though. The idea of like learning new things and meeting new people is always like, to me, the most important aspect of what I do. So.
Sure. Tell us a little bit about your daily schedule. For me, I as a writer, I work best later at night when nobody's calling, when nobody's bothering me. Some people get up like at dark 30. And they do some work until maybe they head off to a regular square job. What's your day like from a creative standpoint? How do you work that out?
Well, I try to pace myself. I mean, what I do, when I'm working on a project, I'm at the computer or at the drawing board for sometimes hours at a time. So I find that I work really well after a nice breakfast and some coffee. So I generally get to work around 9:30 or 10 if I'm working all day. I try to get stuff done early in the morning, and then hopefully stay on schedule with like lunch and things like that. But it kind of depends on what I'm working on. I mean, so if I have a book cover, I work according to what the deadline is. I'm trying not to do as much freelance work as I used to. And really focus on my creative projects. Those things come more sporadically. I tend to work sometimes in spurts. Sometimes I'll think about an idea for months at a time, and I'll work until they all come out. That's kind of how Black Kirby was, and it's also kind of like this project I did with these Black cyborgs called Matters of the Fact, where I had been thinking about these works for like, I don't know, about 4 months. And then I sat down over a 4-day period and churned out like 60, 70 images,
Wow.
So it depends on the project. Sometimes I go back and forth a lot with changes, Some of my clients are pretty nitpicky, about things. Fairly recently, like I said, I did the project with Zeta Elliott on the Deep, and that was actually a project because we were going back and forth about like a lot of these small details or what have you. But as you know, being a writer, I mean, you have a particular way that you want things to see, and so it's my job to try to make that happen, And so, I think that we came up with a really great cover, despite the fact that we kind of had like a few passes on it. But she seemed to be really satisfied with it, and to me, it's like when you're working on a design piece, it's all about what the client needs. I just did a piece with Dr. Julius Bailey. He's doing a piece on hip hop and philosophy, and so we had I had an idea that popped in my head, and I wanted to get it out, and we had a couple of exchanges about the image, but it's always a negotiation. I want to make sure that he's satisfied and that I feel like creatively that I've done something as well that feeds me. But that's how I pick my projects. But I generally work. I work all day. Usually I teach every other day. So for instance, this semester I teach Monday, Wednesdays. So my teaching schedule goes from like 9 to 11:30. I have a few hours between for like lunch and whatever, and then I teach from 2 to 3:20, and then that's my day. Between that, I might have meetings with students or what have you, and then after that, I go back home. And usually, I'm pretty spent though, because people don't realize how hard. I mean, you do because you've taught before, but I people realize you're giving a lot of your energy on a day-to-day basis. So, my studio class is almost 3 hours long. So that's you're on call,
and you're on, you have to be on the whole time too.
Pretty constantly. Even though my class, because we do like visual culture analysis, sometimes we'll watch film and we'll talk about them or we'll write about them. But even then, and that also too, I have like digital components to my classes, so I try to set aside time to do that too. To give feedback and to critique images and stuff like that. So that's part of it. So what happens is with the digital aspect, you extend your class hours a lot too. So sometimes after I've been drawing all day, I might actually log on and see what's going on Facebook, or because I actually have a Facebook site for my SCIFI class, my racist science fiction class, and I use Ning for my other class. So so I'm always like checking in and trying to see what's going on with those classes. And so
you've got 2 full-time jobs, essentially.
Well, mostly, really, it's like 3, because there's because and I've thought about that, because there's the teaching, and there's also like myself as kind of like a freelancer, and then there's it might be 4 because like sometimes I get called and do lectures, and then of course there's the creative who's putting out work, collaborating with people trying to put out creative work. So, I don't have an agent. I was thinking about very seriously procuring an agent sometime in the near future. To kind of like keep these hats spinning correctly. I think I'm getting to that point. I think it's kind of interesting because most people who get the MFA, the Master of Fine Arts, they start making art pretty much immediately, and so they start building their careers as artists. And so what I've done is actually kind of done the opposite, where it's like I've been in the academy building, my academic career, getting tenure and working at research schools and stuff like that. And now, because I'm tenured, I can actually, it frees me up to like do more creative projects. And so I'm getting to the point where my creative career and my academic career kind of like starting to catch up with each other. And which is kind of good, but also harrowing to a certain degree too. So
Well, there's one of the things that people don't realize when they start out is that the business of doing business takes a lot out of you. It takes a lot of time. Sometimes it eats up far more time than you have left to be creative. Because when you think about maintaining a marketing presence, let's say on the internet. If you don't have an agent, you still have to procure your own work. You have to do your own billing. You have to, if you create product, you have to do shipping, receiving, correspondence. And the thing is you can't, people go, well, I'd really like to take the day off, but then if you do that and someone feels snubbed, you may have lost work, and relationship management is huge. A lot of people don't understand that, but maintaining your relationship with your customers is far more important than you would think. People think, well, I'll just do the art and then I'll just turn it in and that'll be that.
Yeah, even being collegial to a certain degree. I mean, it's like, you know, you have to be open and ready to talk to people about the work too. I mean, you know, it is a lot of work. It is, and I don't know. I mean, I love it, but you know, I think that as you're saying, I mean, sometimes having someone to help with those other things could be really, really great. You know. So.
Yeah. You mentioned that you were going to be getting married soon. How soon do you think that's happening? Do you have a date?
That's, August 29th.
August 29th. Excuse me for prying, but how long have you guys known each other?
Let's see, about a year and a half-ish. Almost 2. Actually, you know what? July will be 2 years. You know, honestly. So. Yeah. So that's.
Yeah. Do you see much changing in terms of career or anything because you got married? I would guess not. You know, but I mean, who knows?
Probably not. I mean, you know, one of the attractive things is like, oh, wait a minute. You know, you're tenured, so that means like, you know, job for an extended amount of time. That's awesome. So you know. Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, so that's. I don't really see it change that much. What it's one of the things that prompts me is, okay, I need to figure out which projects I need to work on more, you know, quickly, you know.
Sure.
And that will actually be make a bigger splash, you know, that kind of stuff. So, you know, I don't know. I mean, it does change your thinking immediately.
Yeah. And you know, we've got about 20 minutes to go. Where do you think you're going to be, you know, 5 years from now and maybe 10 years from now? Do you have, and you know, something occurred to me. You're an artist and you're a writer. Have you ever thought of going into like the motion picture arts?
You know, I'll take that first. You know, it's something that I had thought about. I mean, I do have some friends who are in Hollywood and are, you know, making animation and films and stuff like that. Sure. And I don't know. I mean, if something gets picked up, someone wants to make something for one of our products or from one of our projects, yeah. I mean, is it something that I'm really, really like just dead set on getting into? Not necessarily. I mean, you know, it's a different way of thinking about the work, you know. I'm not against trying to work on something that's a motion picture piece. Would I want to do it myself? No. You know, it's just like it's a different type of like fastidiousness that it, you know, it's just not what I mean, I love film. I really do. I love filmmaking. Probably a little bit too much, if you ask Damien. You know, because you know, I tend to just really enjoy just the idea of watching a story happen. And so sometimes I'm really good at turning my brain off, you know, which I'm trying to get better at. So from a story perspective, but yeah, I think that could be cool, you know, to see how that works out. I always thought that particular like J2D2, which is like me and Damien's confederation, or even iTrauma, which is our larger confederation, would be good producers of film. You know? Just because of just how we think about story and our love of genre, like fiction in particular. As far as like 5 years from now, oh man, I've been thinking I want to go up for full professor probably in the next. Right now, I'm an associate professor at UB. I'm hoping to go for full professor probably in the next 2 years. I'm thinking with the amount of work I'm putting out that I should be pretty good. I'm gonna probably be talking to my director pretty soon about, I'll say, what do I need to do to make sure that happens. You know, in the academy. Hopefully, you know, God willing, and if I'm, you know, healthy, I'll be putting out more work. I want to like really hunker down and make more work. You know, I think that a lot of my quote unquote notoriety, fame, whatever you want to call it, has been as a facilitator. You know, and I think that you know, that I still want to do that kind of work, but like putting together symposia and projects that actually give people an opportunity to shine to a certain degree. When Damien and I first started doing curation, it was because we saw a hole. You know, we saw something that was necessary. You know, and hopefully we've found a way to kind of fill that hole, because you know there's still like a lot of people who really want to see the mainstream images, African American images, and that's cool. And I think that's starting to happen. But at the end of the day, I think that there's a lot of stuff that can happen with independence, if only we give them a chance, I think that, that there's because of technology and because a lot of, opportunity, for people to put their work out. So I'm hoping to put out more work. I mean, I want to, Stacy and I have, a ton of ideas for Black Kirby projects. Jamie and I have, a bunch of ideas. Me and or not. But basically all my collaborators, we've been, just in the cut, just thinking about, okay, so how can we maximize this time to put out stuff? So the next 10 years out, hopefully people will be reading the stuff that we're putting out. And maybe that stuff will get made into motion pictures and animations and stuff like that. Oh, yeah, I forgot. I can't believe I forgot a collaborator, my friend Cleveland Buckner, who's been a friend of mine for a long time. If he's listening, I'm so sorry, but he's Stacy and I are working on a project with Cleveland, too. He lives in Los Angeles and is a really great writer. So, my apologies for that.
Well, you've had enough of them, so that if you overlook one briefly, hopefully you'll be, people will cut you some slack. And in terms of being obviously you're, it's pretty cool that you're a tenured professor. You're Black. You're teaching art. In terms of, directly in Afrofuturism, in terms of Black art, in terms of Black artistic endeavor, from an academic point of view, how are you looking at, and not like this is your job. Please don't think that I'm trying to push you into, or talking about a lack, but what do you see in terms of, promoting, the idea of Afrofuturism, Black art, the language of art in terms of race? I mean, how do you see all that kind of shaking out from an academic point of view?
Well, there's so basically I think even today that the mainstream art market is still probably dominated by, a European mindset, European images, Eurocentric images. There are different bastions of kind of quote unquote resistance to that space. I mean, for instance, a really awesome space is the Studio Museum Harlem, which actually has an Afrofuturism show up right now that's been co-curated by Zoe Whitley and Naima Keith, that I have some association with. And so there's spaces like that and other places that are really pushing these notions of the Black speculative space, but also, Black subjectivity, which I think is very important. I think that honestly what's going to happen is you're probably going to see in the near future a lot of different spaces of subjectivity, whether it's LGBT or Latino spaces or, Native American spaces, Black spaces, female spaces. I think that all these different types of work will start coming a lot more to the forefront because, our country is becoming more and more diverse by the second. It always has been, but I think it's actually become a lot more evident. And I want to say that this the Afrofuturism as a space has become a lot more of a pushback to being kind of written out of that space to a certain degree. And so I can see I'm thinking for the next maybe 2 or 3 years, that we're going to see a lot of speculative space, so speculative work coming out of different areas. The conversation has always been difficult to have. I think when I was at U of I, for instance, I wanted to teach a Black visual culture class, and that had a really strong African American art history underpinning. But my director at the time thought that kind of actually mixed up Africa and African American. So that's kind of where we were at that particular point. That's probably changed a lot now, but I'm always about representation. I could make 1 million. Well, maybe 1 million is not a lot. That's too much. But maybe I could make 1,000 stories or 1,000 new images, and we'd still be underrepresented. That's how far behind we are as far as like getting our images into the public sphere.
Into the common culture. Yeah.
Into the common culture. Because we really want stuff to go mainstream. Really, that's
yes,
really
exactly.
You want to become to the
exactly.
point where I don't want to be in a space where I don't where like the type of stories that I want to tell are like othered, The notion of black subjectivity being like unimaginable. I just read this article about I've probably been going around about the web about the lack of white imagination when it comes to seeing people of other descent, being protagonists or subjects, It was about the new Hunger Games movie, which I just saw tonight, actually. And I enjoyed, so it was cool. For there's certain parts that I felt like, could have been done differently, but, that's what it is. But it's the same kind of pushback where, if you have like a mainstream audience, or as my friend on Lee would call a Eurostream audience, that, they see themselves as subject, which makes perfect sense. I mean, if you are used to being in that space. And so I think that we have a lot of work to do around trying to change that, but they see themselves in that space. Even if the character is described as being like black or African descent, there's this pushback. And you know what? I just thought about something else. I was thinking, Walking with Gods. I can't believe I totally I do work on a lot of stuff. David, the amazing activist and rapper David Banner. Yeah. So we worked on a project together called Walking with Gods. It's a short black superhero piece that I get to work for too. So he would be another collaborator. I can't believe I didn't mention that. Sorry.
Dude, you've been around long enough. This is going to happen. I mean, we would have had 2 hours of you talking about the people you work with. So
right,
apologies to anybody that he may have forgotten to mention. And I'm hoping
project.
You don't catch anything like that. Yeah.
No, it's a really good project. So I'm looking forward to continuing working on that. A couple of other things too is that we're supposed to be trying to put together another Black Comic Festival. I was on a team of people that put together that Black Comic Festival that jumped off at the Schomburg last year. And so right now we're trying to put together another one for January. And so January and February I have these large events that are jumping off around Black speculative spaces and comics and things of that nature. So that's really cool. Yeah.
I mean, that'll be good because you'll be in the neighborhood, and I'm going to try to get as much community service in as possible so I can come see you. Something that just occurred to me, and again, I think of these things and they blow right out of my head. But when you talk about, you talked about us going mainstream, and I totally get that because I don't necessarily want to be known as a Japanegro writer who writes about black things.
Right.
I just want to be known as a good writer.
Right.
In the totality of it all. And so, the issue becomes integration in the pure sense of the word, not in the racial sense of the word, but integrating disparate views, non-traditional cultural views into the lexicon of American culture, as a whole. And it seems like, everybody who is not white struggles with that. There's a professor here at the University of Chicago, and he had a big lecture about the fact that we are post-racial in terms of black literature because we don't have the pushback of slavery. And since we are not slaves, then we cannot classify we can't quantify our literature as other because we don't have that pushback, that deficiency, that thing holding us back. And yet, you look at the imprint of the University of Chicago, and for damn sure, they've got their own black literature section. So his own university does not, and I used this earlier, and somebody said, what the hell does that mean? Does not cotton to the idea of the fact that we are post, we're post-racial in any kind of way at all. And I, it's going.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be tough, but I also think that we're on the verge of Afrofuturism, and I mentioned this when I had Yatasha Womack on the show. I think that we're on the verge, and I've mentioned this to Turtel too, that we're on the verge of not so much an explosion of, black-based art, endeavor, writing, and things like that, but we're on the verge of an explosion of a discovery of it, and people understanding that, yes, it's different, it comes from a different perspective, and that this is something that we should look at, that we should laud. And
right.
I think that would be great, because it's not so much, pointing at black art as other, but black art as part of the entire American experience.
Right. And that's something that we're still, because here's the thing. I mean, it'd be nice. I really don't think that we are I think mentally, maybe to a certain degree, some people are post-racial, but if you look at what's been jumping off in Florida and in other spaces, you definitely see that there's even post-Obama, like a hyper-racialized kind of space that's been happening. And so you see you see pushbacks against this notion of integration and this notion of like equity, on different levels, and that's why I think that Afrofuturism as a space of resistance becomes very important, because it starts to twist time and space. It starts to, through agency, starts to reimagine, our country, and starts to reimagine our past, to be more inclusive, to the point where it's not necessary anymore. And I think that's why it's so powerful, that the black imagination is just by existence is a radical imagination, Yeah,
so, and that the basis for that pushback is two things. One is by having elected the president, Obama, and then re-electing him, that gives lie to a certain perspective of white exceptionalism. And there's a whole lot of resistance to that. There's a whole lot of resentment, and that's going to be a tough uphill climb. And when you look in terms of all it took for a lot of things that we thought were declining in terms of prejudice, in terms of bigotry, all it took was electing him for all of that to come out in a way that even surprised a lot of mainstream liberal whites.
Exactly.
This is still a bitter pill, and the final nail in that coffin in terms of fearful. Just fear. Let's call it fear. I don't want to characterize people, but it's scheduled in the 2040s that whites will become a minority in this country, and Latinos will become the dominant population group. And so there you have all of these things going on, and yet I still see an explosion of Afrofuturism as an art form, as a sociology, and as a sub-statement, not an overarching statement like we shall overcome, but definitely as an art form to be reckoned with, and that I think is worth looking forward to, because I mean, first of all, when you look at, I made a joke about this yesterday, but when you look at all of the science fiction movies from the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, there were no black people in there, because they apparently didn't think we were going to be around for whatever reason. And then you come to the 60s, and then there's some you have Star Trek, where you had a black woman on the phone all the time hollering at people, and you had an Asian who didn't know how to drive the starship. And it's well, I mean, if we're going to take it to, and yet, any other black character on there was wearing a red shirt, and he died before the first commercial. So just adjusting our vision to change the depiction of us in the larger culture is something that's going to still be a rather uphill climb.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, I totally agree with that. And so, the idea of imagining yourself in the future is a very audacious notion indeed. But I think a lot of us are up to the task. I intend to put out as much of that kind of work as humanly possible while I'm on the planet, in this particular dimension, and I don't know, and also too, I'm very curious about unpacking a lot of the trauma around our histories here too. I think that there's still a lot of self-hatred and loss of history that has caused a deep wounding in our community as well. And I'm very fascinated by that as well as someone from the South, and because I look at the South as a haunted space and I want to unhaunt it. So by doing that, you manifest the demons and then you banish them back to where they need to go, so you can truly move forward. Because I think that we have a lot of weight, a lot of weight on us too. And also there's a certain amount of erasure as well, and we keep forgetting that Black history is American history.
Yes.
That we self-segregate sometimes, but honestly, like for instance, a movie 12 Years a Slave, that's an American story, and these constructions, blackness, whiteness, all these particular constructions, there are many hands of different nations and colors who have built those constructions, and those are our stories together, even though we want to deny it, we want to construct our America as being this perfect America, and it's not. I'm sorry, it's just not. It never has been, But when you start looking at these other stories, it starts to kind of poke holes in those narratives, which I think Afrofuturism, Black Sci-Fi, whatever you want to call it, does very effectively.
Well, and the other point is that American exceptionalism, in its traditional form, would not have existed without all of the white and the non-white people who made up this country for the last 400 years.
Oh yeah, definitely. Well, yeah.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, I was about to mention Pacific Rim. It's one of the reasons why. Well, there's many reasons why I love that movie, but one of the things I loved the most about it was the fact that it decentralized America as the subject. For once, we didn't see the White House being destroyed by kaiju. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It might have been. They allude to it, but it's taking place, in Hong Kong. So that kind of idea to me is important, that we are part of the world. And when you're talking about Black speculative fiction, it's happening across the globe. There's a lot of people, brown folk of African descent, making stories like this. There's a new show that just started coming on. I forgot what country in Africa now. I want to say, is it Ghanaian? I saw it on Nettie Corfor's page, but it's basically about the last bastion of society, of pure space is Africa, and people are trying to migrate back to Africa. And then the whole story is about how that affects society. Pretty interesting, actually.
Right. Yeah, and the other thing that doesn't, I mean, some of it gets mentioned in Afrofuturism because, of course, some Afrofuturism also looks back. But the story of humanity is the story of Africa. I mean, that's where humanity originated, and as much as people would maybe want to ignore that or marginalize that, it's still the reality of the growth of our species. So
that's true. That's true.
I swear to you, I think these next 5 or 6 years are going to be so interesting in terms of art, in terms of writing, and in terms of the stories that are going to come out on the basis of Afrofuturism. And this is not necessarily to blow my own horn, but one of the reasons why I wrote what I wrote a story that said, what happens in America when they find out that black folks have been secretly living on the backside of the moon since before Neil Armstrong got there. I mean, to have come up with an idea like that, I wanted to have a big idea that had never been done. And so a lot of things are happening now that I don't think could have happened even 10 years ago, So we may be at some kind of tipping point for the growth of these kinds of stories. I hate to have to cut this off, but we've just pretty much run out of time.
Yeah.
I want to thank you, John, for being here, man. You made this really a treat. This was a joy. It was easy to do, and
likewise, it was a lot of fun.
And seriously, man, please think about keeping track of your comings and goings and where you can be found, so that people can meet you. People can come and don't take this the wrong way. I mean this in all honesty. To be inspired by what you do and by your example. Again, we'll check in with you later when you have new things coming up. And for those of you who are listening as a podcast, this show is broadcast or actually live every Friday evening at 9 p.m. Central, and that's 8, 7, and 6 for all the other time zones. For those of you in Africa, Alaska, and other places that I've actually talked to people, you've got your own time zone to figure out. John, thank you again, and I'm going to turn it over to our skipper, Jarvis, and let him say our good nights.
All right. Thank you so much, Will. It was fun.
All right. Thank you so much for agreeing to come on and share your wisdom with us on the show. I also want to thank William for a wonderful hosting of the show, as always, and everyone that participated on the show, everyone that's going to listen to the show, everyone that shared the show with someone else. Your work has been greatly appreciated, and I'm here with my family, and I'm going to have to cut it a little short because I kind of stepped away to make sure the show was done. But it was an outstanding show, as always, and I appreciate everyone that was involved. Thank you very much, and have a good night.
All right, thank you so much. All right.
Take care, everybody.
Okay.
Good night.
Bye-bye. Good night. 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 Okay.
Good night.